Imagine for a moment that you're a woman who's been in relationships where everything seemed to click. Great conversations, mutual attraction, even shared dreams. But then, suddenly, he pulls away emotionally. Or worse, he stays. But not really. And you're left wondering, what truly makes a man fall in love? What is it that sparks a deep connection in him, beyond desire or routine? Most women believe love comes from effort, from constant care, from showing interest and devotion. And while all of that has its place, what many don't realize, and this is where Carl Jung offers us a powerful insight, is that love doesn't begin on the surface. It begins in the unconscious. What truly awakens deep love in a man isn't always visible. It's not in what you do or say. It's in what you unknowingly represent to him. It's in that silent energy you emit when you stop trying to please, when you simply are. And often, the more you detach from the need to be chosen, the more unforgettable you become. It's not magic, it's psychology. Jung called it archetypal projection, that moment when someone doesn't fall in love with who you are, but with what you awaken in their inner world. He might never say it, but there was a moment he looked at you and saw more than a woman. He saw a symbol, an energy, something that challenged him and drew him in at the same time. Have you ever felt unforgettable to someone without doing anything extraordinary? Has someone come back to you after a long time for no clear reason? Maybe it wasn't you he couldn't let go of, but what you triggered inside him. If you've experienced something like this, share it into comments, because those moments often reveal far more than we think. The great paradox is that men don't fall in love with what they understand. They fall for what they can't fully grasp. They fall for what they can't control, for what shakes their inner framework. And when a woman lives in her truth, when she doesn't betray herself out of fear of losing him, something shifts. Her presence becomes magnetic, even if she's not trying to attract. But many women, instead of trusting that authenticity, lose themselves trying to fit in, to be what they think he needs. And that's when the spark begins to fade, not because there's no love, but because the mystery that ignited it is gone. Jung said that what we repress becomes our destiny, and when a woman represses her essence, her energy stops resonating with his soul. The most fascinating part? He often doesn't even know why he keeps thinking of her, why he dreams of her, why, even after letting her go, her image lingers like a whisper he can't silence. Because when a woman unknowingly embodies an archetype he hasn't yet integrated, she becomes a mirror. And no one forgets the mirror that showed them their own soul for the first time. Carl Jung explained it with almost poetic clarity. We don't love people for who they are, but for what they represent to us. And when a woman, without trying, becomes a powerful symbol in a man's unconscious, she awakens a pull far deeper than the physical. It's a pull that touches something ancient, that stirs emotional memories long buried. It's not coincidence, it's psychic destiny. A man may meet many women in his lifetime. Some will make him laugh. Some will be there during hard times. Some may even share years with him. But there is one, only one, who remains, quietly resonating. And she's rarely the most beautiful or the most perfect. She is almost always the one who never tried to be, the one who showed up with a mix of calm and certainty, the one who didn't seek external validation, who, instead of trying to please him, chose herself without guilt. That woman, without realizing it, becomes a symbolic figure, a manifestation of his anima, the feminine part of his unconscious that has yet to be integrated. And when she enters his life, something inside him stirs. But here comes the most curious part. Many women don't realize when they're in that role. They don't see the impact they have because they're not doing anything extraordinary. They're just being. They're vibrating in authenticity, connected to their essence. And that authenticity is profoundly disruptive for a man who has only known emotional connections that were superficial or based on expectations. In that moment, he doesn't fall in love with her words or her body. He falls in love with what she reflects back to him. A part of himself he's never explored, but that suddenly begins to stir. And, of course, that can scare him. Because deep love is not comfortable. It's transformative. It forces you to look inward. That's why some men pull away just when they start to feel something real, not because they don't care, but because something deep within them realizes that this woman is not like the others. And if they stay, they'll have to change, surrender, open themselves to a part of their soul that's long been asleep. And often, they're not ready, because the image she activates is too intense, too alive. They can't control it. They can't label it. So they run. But they're not running from her. They're running from what they're feeling inside. This is why it's so important that you, woman, don't take it as rejection. If you ever walked away from someone and didn't understand why their absence hurt so deeply, maybe it wasn't unrequited love. Maybe you were the mirror he couldn't hold up to himself. Tell me something. Have you ever felt pushed away not because of what you did, but because of what you represented? Was it hard to understand? Share it in the comments. Your experience might help many others who are feeling the same right now. When a woman stops searching for love and starts fully inhabiting herself, something in her energy shifts. It's not about pride or indifference. It's a silent, calm strength that communicates without words. I belong to myself, and that to the masculine unconscious is both a powerful invitation and a deeply disorienting one. Carl Jung believed that what we don't integrate within ourselves, we search for outside. So when a man encounters a woman who embodies qualities he hasn't yet developed, emotional freedom, intuition, depth, something within him awakens. And not necessarily in a pleasant way. Sometimes the first thing he feels is not attraction, but discomfort. Why? Because she reflects an emptiness, an inner place he's avoided for years. Maybe all his life he's chased relationships where he could be the protector, the strong one, the one in control. But now, faced with a woman who doesn't need rescuing, who doesn't idolize him, who isn't desperate for his attention, he feels disarmed. And that's often where the obsession begins, not with her as a person, but with regaining the illusion of control that her presence shattered. He doesn't realize it consciously, but what he's chasing isn't her. It's the repair of his fractured identity. This explains why some men, after losing a woman like that, can't fully let her go. Months, even years, can pass. and they still carry her memory like a scar. It's not that they haven't gotten over her. It's that she represents a before and after in their emotional lives. The problem is, many men don't know what to do with that void. They haven't learned to look inward, to take responsibility for their wounds. So they look outward to other women, more work, distractions, but nothing fills the space she left behind. Because what left wasn't just a person, it was a possibility for transformation. And here's the part most people miss. That woman isn't unforgettable because she was perfect, but because she was authentic. Because she left when she realized that staying would mean betraying herself. Because she didn't scream or beg. She just closed the door with dignity. And that rare, brave gesture leaves a mark on the masculine soul, like a lesson that is never forgotten. To you who are listening, have you ever felt that your dignity was mistaken for coldness? That your silence was seen as disinterest, when in reality it was your way of honoring yourself? If so, share it below. Someone out there might need to read it to understand that letting go isn't giving up. It's saving yourself. The unconscious doesn't distinguish between what is real and what is symbolic. For Jung, this was one of the most powerful truths of the human psyche. That's why when a woman becomes a symbol in a man's mind, she stops being just a person. She becomes an idea, an echo, a mirror. And no one forgets the mirror that made them face themselves. After losing her, many men think what they miss is her physical presence. But in reality, what hurts most is the disconnection from the feeling she awakened in them, that mix of admiration, confusion, and desire that couldn't be explained logically. Because when a bond touches the soul, no rational closure is ever enough. In her absence, the male unconscious begins working with a terrifying intensity. It rereads conversations, remembers gestures, idealizes moments, but none of it brings back the original feeling because he's not looking for her. He's trying to return to that inner place he could only access through her. And that, deep down, is both beautiful and tragic. Because the more he tries to relive her in memory, the further he drifts from the real opportunity for integration, to look within and ask, what parts of me were activated by her presence? What emptiness was revealed when she left? The woman who doesn't compete, who doesn't beg, who doesn't desperately try to hold on, embodies something profoundly revolutionary for a man's mind. She doesn't represent traditional romance or the pleasing figure. She represents freedom. And that, although it hurts, fascinates. Because deep down we all seek freedom, but very few are willing to love from that freedom. Through this process, a man unknowingly begins his journey toward individuation. Jung described this as the path where we stop searching outside for what we can only find within. And often, that journey doesn't begin with an epiphany, but with a loss. Sometimes, all it takes is a look, a goodbye without blame, a door closed in quiet calm, to make a man's entire inner world collapse. And in that collapse, he doesn't just find sorrow, he finds an opportunity. Because where nothing is left, something new can finally be built. And maybe that's what leaves the deepest mark. that she didn't try to stay by force, didn't fight her own departure, but understood something essential, that what's real doesn't need to be forced, and that the deepest love is never begged for. It is honored. Let me ask you something with complete honesty. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who couldn't see your worth? Did you do it out of self-love, even though it hurt? If so, share it in the comments. Your story might touch more hearts than you can imagine. In the loneliness that follows the departure of a conscious woman, a silent transformation begins. At first, he thinks he can overcome it like he always has, by distracting himself, replacing, denying. But something is different this time. Nothing fills him. Nothing soothes him. Because this wasn't just another loss. It was an internal rupture. Carl Jung spoke of turning points in the psyche, moments when life, without asking for permission, forces us to face what we've been avoiding. For many men, that woman who left quietly, without drama or explanations, becomes one of those turning points. Not because she wanted to hurt him, but because through her absence, she revealed a truth no one else dared to show him. Suddenly, he starts asking questions he never thought to ask. Why did I feel like I needed her? Why did it hurt so much when she left, even if I barely knew her? What part of me was I seeking in her? And there, in that sea of questions, the image he had of himself begins to crumble. He's no longer the man who controls everything, no longer the one who never falls in love, no longer the one who always leads emotionally. Now, he is a vulnerable human being, touched by a connection deeper than any before, a connection that changed him. And though it confuses him, it also moves something within. What that woman represented through her silence, her autonomy, her loving but unattached authenticity, was something he had yet to discover within himself. She didn't come to offer him stability. She came to show him how unstable his inner world really was. And that revelation, as painful as it may be, is the beginning of awakening. Many men, when reaching this point, resist. They want to go back to how things were. They want to forget, to shut it down, to bury it. But the soul doesn't work that way. Once it has been touched, there's no turning back. And so, amidst that discomfort, some decide to do something different. To pause, to breathe, to look within. They start reading, reflecting, asking themselves questions about their childhood, their past relationships, the patterns they've repeated without noticing. They begin to question their need for validation, their fear of abandonment, their difficulty in loving without control, and little by little they begin to understand it wasn't her who was the problem. It was the distorted image they had projected onto her. This moment is key, because here is where the possibility of integration is born, of no longer seeking outside what can only be built within. And over time, the wound begins to heal, not through denial, but through acceptance, through the humility of recognizing that love is so much more than possession. And you, who are listening to this, maybe you've been there too. Maybe you also felt like your presence was misunderstood, or that your departure was seen as coldness, when in reality it was your soul choosing peace. If you recognize yourself in that, share it in the comments. your truth could be the reflection someone else needs today? As time passes, something begins to change. Not loudly, not through a big external event, but quietly. It's as if a new way of seeing starts to awaken inside him. He no longer searches for that woman in other people. He no longer chases her in memories. Now, he begins to understand what really happened. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation begins when we stop identifying with our masks. And that is precisely what has taken place. He no longer sees himself as the conqueror, the one always in control. He has begun to see his cracks, and instead of frightening him, those cracks are becoming his most human parts. The woman who left with calm, who made no demands, who caused no scenes, now appears in his mind in a different way. She's no longer the unattainable woman. Now, she's the woman who, without meaning to, showed him the value of his own inner world. It's no longer about getting her back. It's about understanding what she awakened. And what she awakened wasn't desire. It was presence. It was awareness. It was an invitation to return to himself. Because what captivated him wasn't her silence, but what that silence reflected. A woman who didn't need validation to feel complete. A woman who wasn't willing to stay at the cost of her peace. In a culture where men are taught that to love is to possess, that to bond is to dominate, this kind of feminine figure who loves from a place of freedom represents an internal revolution. She cannot be manipulated. She cannot be held onto. She can only be honored. And that, deep down, is what transforms him. Then he begins to treat himself differently, to listen more closely, to stop seeking love as if seeking salvation. It's no longer about finding someone to choose him despite his emptiness, but about becoming someone who chooses himself with honesty, and from there, creating real connection. In that moment, her image softens. It no longer hurts the way it once did. Now, she's a luminous memory, almost sacred, because she was the one who, without intending to, ignited his soul. Not to stay, but to show him the way. And if you, woman, have ever felt that your way of loving was misunderstood, if you ever chose to leave because staying would have meant betraying yourself, I want you to know something. Those kinds of decisions are never forgotten. Maybe no one told you. Maybe he never fully understood it. But you planted something, and that seed, even if it grew in silence, changed a life. Have you ever felt that your energy left a mark on someone even without meaning to? That your departure meant more than any forced presence ever could? If so, share your experience below. Your story might be the spark someone else needs on their own journey. There comes a moment when obsession fades and gives way to something deeper, understanding. It's no longer just the need to have her close. It's the recognition that she was, unknowingly, a turning point, the mark of a before and after. Not because of what she said, but because of how she existed and how she left. Carl Jung believed that what moves us deeply remains within us as a symbol, and a symbol doesn't fade. It doesn't need to be present to keep acting on us. That's what happens with her. She's no longer there, yet her energy is still alive, like a melody that keeps resonating long after the music has ended. He begins to see more clearly. He starts to understand that for a long time he sought relationships where he could feel validated, important, indispensable. But with her, it was different. With her, there was no need, no struggle. There was choice. And that disarmed him, because no one had ever taught him to love from a place of freedom. No one had ever shown him that he could be vulnerable without losing his dignity, that he didn't have to be needed to be deeply loved. She did that, not with words, but with her presence, and also with her absence. And it's here that true transformation begins. He no longer looks for women to fill a void. He no longer tries to fix his feelings with new stories. He now understands that love is not something to demand or earn. It's something to share from a place of peace, not from lack. The most beautiful part is that in this moment, she no longer needs to do anything. She doesn't need to come back or explain herself or prove anything. Her role has already been fulfilled. She was a catalyst, a lighthouse, a mirror. Her energy did what it needed to do. It woke him up. And you, watching this, have you ever felt that you were the starting point in someone's emotional awakening, even if the relationship didn't last? Did you feel that something deep stayed with them, even if they never said it out loud? If any part of this story resonates with you, share it below. Sometimes sharing what we've lived through is the most silent and powerful way to heal. In this new chapter, he no longer runs from himself. He now understands that everything he was looking for in her, that calm, that depth, that freedom, he can also build within. Maybe not right away, maybe not without effort, but with every conscious choice, he moves closer to his truth. And the curious thing is that he no longer needs to find her in someone else, because now, when he remembers her presence in his life, he doesn't do it with nostalgia, but with gratitude, because it was she who, without knowing it, showed him that real love isn't about staying, it's about leaving a mark. And so, in the place where there once was emptiness, there is now understanding. It no longer hurts the way it used to. There's no more anxiety over unanswered questions. There's a new way of seeing life, calmer, more honest, more awake. Because once a man crosses the threshold into himself, he can never love the same way again. Carl Jung said that what we accept within ourselves transforms us, and that is exactly what has happened. That man, who once needed to be chosen to feel worthy, now understands that his value isn't in being desired, it's in being authentic. He no longer seeks from a place of lack, he loves from a place of wholeness. The image of her, that woman who never begged, who didn't stay where she wasn't truly seen, is no longer a wound. She is a compass. Her memory, which once burned, now shines. Because she wasn't a loss, she was a message, a lesson wrapped first in presence, and then in absence. And what seemed like a goodbye was, in truth, the beginning of everything. That love, which didn't end with promises or explanations, made room for something even greater. Transformation, not of a relationship, but of the soul. Because when someone touches your essence, it doesn't matter whether they stay or go. What matters is what they awaken in you. And you, woman, on the other side of this story, You may never have known the real impact your energy had. You may have thought you left unnoticed. But I want you to remember this. When you love from awareness, from dignity, from freedom, you always leave a mark. Not on the other's ego, but on their soul. And that lasts. And you, man, who has lived through this process, perhaps now you understand that it wasn't her you lost, but a part of yourself that you hadn't yet embraced. And maybe, just maybe, her departure wasn't the end, but the doorway that brought you back to yourself. I invite you to share in the comments what this video stirred within you. Maybe you lived a similar story. Maybe you're the woman who knew how to let go in time. Maybe you're the man who began to awaken. Whatever your experience, your voice could be the mirror someone else needs today. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who's ready to love from a different place.